the government shutdown, and he's now in the low 40s. He'd fallen into the high 30s during the government shutdown. But he never goes any higher, and he doesn't go significantly lower. So at this point, it would seem that public perceptions of Donald Trump are not going to sway his actions.
We're still waiting for the president to emerge from the White House to the Rose Garden. He's anticipated to speak in a few moments about national security, the southern border, and may declare a national emergency so he can get money for his border wall, and that's his words. Kevin Cirilli at the White House. Let me ask you about Mitch McConnell. Who is the president listening to right now? Is it Mitch McConnell? What would McConnell be telling him?
All of those things.
Well, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has largely stood in lockstep with President Trump, even during that 35-day government shutdown, partial government shutdown, and for the most part has delivered we're getting word. We just got word that there's a official 2-minute warning, a second 2-minute warning that we've received here. But for the president, for his part, facing some criticism for his decision to use declare a national emergency. Now, the president is likely going to declare that national emergency, sign that government funding bill to keep the government open. He's joined by his Attorney General, William Barr, sitting here behind me in the front row, as well as what are known as angel families. They are the survivors of family members who have lost a victim to undocumented immigrants who are here. So the president's set to declare that national emergency, as well as to sign this budget agreement to keep the government open.
He's definitely set the stage. Briefly, Michael McKee, as we await the president, there's obviously also the bill that needs to be signed, but it is on the president's desk.
This is basically a continuing resolution that funds 9 federal departments and dozens of agencies through the end of the fiscal year, which is September 30th. It provides money for humanitarian assistance at the border, interestingly enough. So he's going to declare a crisis in part because there's a humanitarian problem there, and they are funding that. There's additional funding for the Department of Homeland Security, $1 billion to start propping up the 2020 census. There's more money for NASA, money for the opioid epidemic, and interestingly enough, a 1.9% pay raise for federal employees. The president scrapped that. Congress passed it over his objections as part of this bill.
Will there be anything focused on in that bill today, once he signs it, if he also declares a national emergency, or will all of the details of that bill just be moved to the sidelines?
All the details kind of get moved to the sidelines, except for the $1.4 billion that they're giving him to construct this 55 miles of fencing, plus other border security items. It's not just all money for a fence. So that will get some attention. And also what's not in the bill is going to get some attention. The debt ceiling is not raised. That was a big issue. There's nothing in there to give back pay to federal contractors. Remember, federal employees got back pay for the government shutdown, but federal contractors had hoped to get something. They do not get that. And there's nothing that has any impact on the tax code. There are technical changes that need to be made to the tax reductions that they passed last year, and they could not get that attached as well. And nothing for disaster relief. The president had been talking about taking some money away from disaster relief, particularly for Puerto Rico. We don't know that he's going to do that. In theory, it might happen under his emergency declaration, but the bill itself is just your garden variety, for the most part, extender for the spending, and it just means that we come back October 1st with no spending bill, and we're going to have this fight all over again.
But the government doesn't partially shut down tonight, at the very least, so there's that. Is there any chance that he emerges from the White House into the Rose Garden and has decided to, make an extension, give an extension that he won't declare a national emergency yet, and that, this possibility?
We have no idea. I mean, you would say that the signals have all been that he is going to declare a national emergency. The White House has said it. Sarah Sanders has said it. So one assumes that that is what is going to happen. I suppose, given that it is Donald Trump, there's a 1 or 2% chance that your scenario could come true, and he comes out and says he changed his mind again. We don't know what the delay is about. That could be it, I suppose.
Well, we definitely shouldn't jump to any conclusions until we've actually heard. Kevin Cirilli, let me ask you, Democrats are already pretty apoplectic about certain issues here, not least of which, the platform was that Mexico would pay for the wall, and that's now not happening. How apoplectic will they be after this?
Well, we heard from Speaker Pelosi yesterday in the sense that they are fully prepared for a legal fight and fully anticipate that is how this is going to play out. And we should note just the criticism that the president has received or skepticism rather, from Republicans on Capitol Hill, as well as in this morning, in terms of how the president is proceeding to go ahead and forge ahead. Now, meanwhile, the president also facing questions on trade negotiations with China, as well as a looming fight over the debt limit, and of course negotiations with North Korea dictator Kim Jong-un. So by averting the government shutdown, he is poised to, in the next couple of weeks, continue with more volatile situations that are certain to reverberate in the market as well.
Michael, is it wise for the president to declare a national emergency and then leave for President's Day weekend?
The national emergency is not really an emergency in the sense that we've thought of them in the past, like the reaction to 9/11. So it probably doesn't matter all that much. If it would have been bad optics for the president to be seen out golfing when other things need to be done, Donald Trump would have been in trouble a long time ago. So that probably doesn't matter a whole lot.
Kevin, are other lawmakers planning? Actually, Kevin, we'll ask you that question in a little bit. It looks like we have a president that is about to walk up to the podium and potentially declare a national emergency. The President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Thank you very much, everybody. Before we begin, I'd like to just say that we have a large team of very talented people in China. We've had a negotiation going on for about 2 days. It's going extremely well. Who knows what that means, because it only matters if we get it done, but we're very much working very closely with China and President Xi, who I respect a lot. Very good relationship that we have. And we're a lot closer than we ever were in this country with having a real trade deal. We're covering everything, all of the points that people have been talking about for years that said couldn't be done, whether it was theft or anything. The unfairness. We've been losing, on average, $375 billion a year with China. A lot of people think it's $506 billion. Some people think it's much more than that. We're going to be leveling the playing field. The tariffs are hurting China very badly. They don't want them, and frankly, if we can make the deal, it'd be my honor to remove them. But otherwise, we're having many billions of dollars pouring into our treasury. We've never had that before with China. It's been very much of a one-way street. So that's happening, and the relationship with China is very good, but I think they finally respect our country. They haven't respected us for a long time, not for a long time. The UK and the US, as you probably have been seeing and hearing, we're agreeing to go forward and preserve our trade agreement. You know all of the situation with respect to Brexit and the complexity and the problems, but we have a very good trading relationship with UK, and that's just been strengthened further. So with the UK, we're continuing our trade, and we are going to actually be increasing it very substantially as time goes by. We expect that the UK will be very, very substantially increased as it relates to trade with the United States. The relationship there also is very good. We have a lot of great announcements having to do with Syria and our success with the eradication of the caliphate, and that'll be announced over the next 24 hours, and many other things. A lot of positive things are going on. We're working on a summit, and you know all about the summit. It'll be in Vietnam, Hanoi, and we'll be meeting in Hanoi. I think a lot of you will be going, I suspect. And I hope we have the same good luck as we had in the first summit. A lot was done in the first summit. No more rockets going up, no more missiles going up, no more testing of nuclear. Get back our remains, the remains of our great heroes from the Korean War. And we got back our hostages. But we hope we're going to be very much equally as successful. I'm in no rush for speed. We just don't want testing. The sanctions, as you know, remain. Everything is remaining. China's been helping us, and Russia's been helping us. And South Korea, I think you can say, has been, we've been working very closely with South Korea, with Japan. But China, Russia on the border have really been at least partially living up to what they're supposed to be doing, and that's okay, as per the United Nations. So we will have a meeting on the 27th and 28th of February, and I think that will be a very successful one. I look forward to seeing Chairman Kim. We have also established a very good relationship, which has never happened between him or his family and the United States. They have really taken advantage of the United States. Billions of dollars has been paid to them. And we won't let that happen, but we think that North Korea and Chairman Kim have a tremendous potential as an economic force, economic power. Their location between South Korea and then Russia and China, right smack in the middle, is phenomenal. And we think they have a great chance for tremendous economic prosperity in the future. So I look forward to seeing Chairman Kim in Vietnam. Today I'm announcing several critical actions that my administration is taking to confront a problem that we have right here at home. We fight wars that are 6,000 miles away, wars that we should have never been in many cases, but we don't control our own border. So we're going to confront the national security crisis on our southern border. And we're going to do it one way or the other. We have to do it. Not because it was a campaign promise, which it is. It was one of many, by the way, not my only one. We're rebuilding the military. Our economy is thriving like never before. You look at other economies. They're doing terribly, and we're doing phenomenally. The market is up tremendously today. Not that that's anything, but, you know, because I'll go back in and they'll say, oh, the market just went down. But the market is getting close to the new highs that we created. We have all the records. We have every record, but we're getting close to that point again where we'll create new records. So our country is doing very well economically, and we've done a lot. But one of the things I said I have to do and I want to do is border security, because we have tremendous amounts of drugs flowing into our country, much of it coming from the southern border. When you drugs pouring across the border, if you're going to have human traffickers pouring across the border in areas where we have no protection, in areas where we don't have a barrier, then very hard to make America great again. But we've done a fantastic job, but we haven't been given the equipment. We haven't been given the walls. And in the bill, by the way, they didn't even fight us on most of the stuff. Ports of entry, we have so much money, we don't know what to do with it. I don't know what to do with all the money they're giving us. It's crazy. The only place they don't want to give us much money, $1.375 billion. Sounds like a lot, but it's not so much, although we're putting it to much better use than it used to be. A lot of the past administrations, it was easy to get, they didn't build, or they didn't do what they could have done. It would have been great. It would have been great to have done it earlier, but I was a little new to the job, a little new to the profession. And we had a little disappointment for the first year and a half. People that should have stepped up did not step up. They didn't step up, and they should have. It would have been easy. Not that easy, but it would have been a lot easier. But some people didn't step up. But we're stepping up now. So we have a chance of getting close to $8 billion. Whether it's $8 billion or $2 billion or $1.5 billion, it's going to build a lot of wall. We're getting it done. We're right now in construction with wall in some of the most important areas. And we have renovated a tremendous amount of wall, making it just as good as new. That's where a lot of the money has been spent on renovation. In fact, we were restricted to renovating, which is okay. But we're going to run out of areas that we can renovate pretty soon. So, and we need new wall. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank in particular the angel moms and dads for being here. Thank you very much. We have great respect for you. The real country, our real country, the people that really love our country, they love you. So I just want you to know that. I know how hard you fight, and I know how hard a fight you're having. I also want to thank all of the law enforcement for the job you do. Believe me, our country loves you, and they respect you greatly. And we're giving you a lot of surplus. We're giving you surplus military equipment, which a lot of people didn't like giving previous to this administration. But hundreds of millions of dollars of surplus equipment. And as we get it, as you know, we send it down, and you have much better protection. But I really appreciate you being here. So the order is signed, and I'll sign the final papers as soon as I get into the Oval Office, and we will have a national emergency, and we will then be sued, and they will sue us in the Ninth Circuit, even though it shouldn't be there, and we will possibly get a bad ruling, and then we'll get another bad ruling, and then we'll end up in the Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll get a fair shake, and we'll win in the Supreme Court, just like the ban. They sued us in the Ninth Circuit, and we lost, and then we lost in the appellate division, and then we went to the Supreme Court, and we won. And it was very interesting, because yesterday they were talking about the ban, because we have a ban. It's very helpful. Madam Secretary, is that right? Without the ban, we'd have a bigger problem. We have a ban on certain areas, certain countries, depending on what's going on in the world. And we won, but somebody said, President Trump lost on the ban. Well, he was right. I lost at the lower court. He didn't say that we ultimately won at the United States Supreme Court. They didn't want to say that. They didn't want to go that far. They were saying how I lost. The person sitting right up here, Donald Trump lost on the ban. Yeah, I did. And then I lost a second time. You should have said that too. And then it went to the Supreme Court, and I won. Didn't want to take it that far. But we won on the ban, and we won on other things too. The probably easiest one to win is on declaring a national emergency, because we're declaring it for virtual invasion purposes, drugs, traffickers, and gangs. And one of the things, just to finish, we have removed thousands of MS-13 gang monsters. Thousands. They're out of this country. We take them out by the thousands, and they are monsters. Okay. Do you have any questions? Yeah. John, go ahead.
Yes, we do.
You were prepared. Mr. President, a lot of the money...
Were you saying I was prepared?
What, with the microphone and prepared for questions?
I thought you meant I was prepared. I couldn't believe you said that. People don't like saying that.
You were prepared for questions.
I am prepared. I'm always prepared.
A lot of the money that goes to count toward your $8 billion is money that's being reprogrammed in the DOD budget. How can you guarantee to military families and to our men and women of the military that none of the money that would be reprogrammed to a wall will take away from other technology, other renovations, construction that is desperately needed in our military?
So, John, we had certain funds that are being used at the discretion of generals, at the discretion of the military. Some of them haven't been allocated yet, and some of the generals think that this is more important. I was speaking to a couple of them. They think this is far more important than what they were going to use it for. I said, what were you going to use it for? And I won't go into details, but didn't sound too important to me. Plus, if you think, I've gotten $700 billion for the military in year one, and then last year $716 billion, and we're rebuilding our military. But we have a lot, and under the previous administration, our military was depleted, badly depleted, and they weren't spending. I mean, they had a much smaller amount of money. So when I got $700 billion and then $716 billion, and this year it's going to be pretty big too, because there's few things more important than our military. You know, I'm a big deficit believer in all of that, but before we really start focusing on certain things, we have to build up our military. It was very badly depleted. And we're buying all new jet fighters, all new missiles, all new defensive equipment. We'll soon have a military like we've never had before. But when you think about the kind of numbers you're talking about, So you have 700 billion, 716 billion, when I need 2 billion, 3 billion out of that for a wall, which is a very important instrument, very important for the military because of the drugs that pour in. And as you know, we have specific rules and regulations where they have drugs and what you can do in order to stop drugs, and that's part of it too. We're taking a lot of money from that realm also. But when you have that kind of money going into the military, this is a very, very small amount that we're asking for. Now, go ahead. Go ahead. ABC. Not NBC. I like ABC a little bit more, not much. Come on, ABC. Not much. Pretty close.
Mr. President, what do you say to those, including some of your Republican allies, who say that you are violating the Constitution with this move and setting a bad precedent that will be abused by possibly Democratic presidents in the future? Marco Rubio.
Well, not too many people, yeah. Not too many people have said that. But the courts will determine that. Look, I expect to be sued. I shouldn't be sued. Very rarely do you get sued when you do national emergency. And then other people say, oh, if you use it for this, now what are we using it for? We've got to get rid of drugs and gangs and people. It's an invasion. We have an invasion of drugs and criminals coming into our country that we stop, but it's very hard to stop. With a wall, it would be very easy. So I think that we will be very successful in court. I think it's clear. And the people that say we create precedent, well, what do you have, 56 or a lot of times? Well, that's creating precedent. And many of those are far less important than having a border. You don't have a border, you don't have a country. You know, we fight, before I got here, we fight all over the world to create borders for countries. But we don't create a border for our own country. So I think what will happen is, sadly, we'll be sued, and sadly, it'll go through a process, and happily we'll win, I think. Go ahead. Let's go. Let's hear it, NBC.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say, when in the past, when President Obama tried to use executive action as it related to immigration, you said the whole concept of executive order, it's not the way the country's supposed to be run. You said you're supposed to go through Congress and make a deal. Will you concede that you were unable to make the deal that you had promised in the past, and that the deal you're ending up with now from Congress is less than what you could have had before a 35-day shutdown? I
went through Congress. I made a deal. I got almost $1.4 billion when I wasn't supposed to get $1. Not $1. He's not going to get $1. Well, I got $1.4 billion, but I'm not happy with it. I also got billions and billions of dollars for other things. Port of entries, lots of different things. The purchase of drug equipment, more than we were even requesting. In fact, the primary fight was on the wall. Everything else, we have so much, as I said, I don't know what to do with it. We have so much money. But on the wall, they skimped. So I was successful in that sense, but I want to do it faster. I could do the wall over a longer period of time. I didn't need to do this, but I'd rather do it much faster. And I don't have to do it for the election. I've already done a lot of wall for the election, 2020. And the only reason we're up here talking about this is because of the election. Because they want to try and win an election which it looks like they're not going to be able to do. And this is one of the ways they think they can possibly win, is by obstruction and a lot of other nonsense. And I think that I just want to get it done faster. That's all. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Roberta Rampton from Reuters. I wanted to ask about China. Do you feel that enough progress has been made in the talks to head off the increase in tariffs scheduled for March 1? Well,
you know, you're talking to the wrong person, because I happen to like tariffs, okay? I mean, we're taking in billions and billions of dollars in tariffs from China. And our steel industry now, as an example, we tax dumped steel. Much of it comes from China at 25%. Our steel industry is so vibrant now again. They're building plants all over the United States. It's a beautiful thing. And from a defensive standpoint, and from any standpoint, you need steel. You know, you can do without certain industries. Our country cannot do without steel. So I love tariffs, but I also love them to negotiate. And right now, China is paying us billions of dollars a year in tariffs. And I haven't even started. Now, here's the thing. If we make a deal, they won't have to pay. You know, it'll be a whole different story. They won't be paying that, but we'll have a fair deal. There won't be intellectual property theft. There won't be so many other things that have gone on. And no other president has done this. No other president. We didn't have a deal with China. You had the WTO, one of the worst trade deals ever made, probably even worse than NAFTA, if that's believable, which is, you know, hard to believe, because I think NAFTA was just a disaster. It was a total disaster for our country. And now we made the USMCA, which is going to be a great deal. And by the way, the USMCA from Mexico, that's United States, Mexico, Canada, that's where the money's coming from, not directly but indirectly, for the wall. And nobody wants to talk about that, because we're saving billions and billions of dollars a year if Congress approves that deal. Now, they might not want to approve a deal just because they'll say, one of the things I'm thinking of doing, this has never been done before. No matter how good a deal I make with China, if they sell me Beijing for $1, if they give me 50% of their land and every ship that they've built over the last 2 years, which is a lot, and they give them to me free, the Democrats will say, what a lousy deal. That's a terrible deal. Like ZTE, I got more than $1 billion penalty in a short period of time, and the Democrats said, oh, should have gotten more. When I made that deal, I said, this is incredible. I got over $1 billion penalty, plus they had to change their board of directors. They had to change their top management. But they had to pay over $1 billion. I said, what a deal. It took like a week. And the Democrats didn't even know there was a problem with ZT. I'm the one that fined them. I'm the one that settled it. Over $1 billion. And President Xi called me, and he said it would be important to him if they could get a deal. And we made a deal, paid like in a short period of time. The Democrats went out and said, oh, they should have done better. So what I'm thinking of doing is getting Chuck Schumer, getting Nancy Pelosi, having them bring 2 or 3 of their brilliant representatives, and we'll all go down together, and what we'll do is we'll negotiate. I'll put them in the room and let them speak up. Because any deal I make with China, if it's it's going to be better than any deal that anybody ever dreamt possible. Or I'm not going to have a deal. It's very simple. But any deal I make with China, Schumer's going to stand up and say, oh, it should have been better. It should have been better. And you know what? That's not acceptable to me. So I'm thinking about doing something very different. I don't think it's ever been. I just don't want to be second guessed. But that's not even second guess. That's called politics. Sadly, I'd probably do the same thing to them. Okay? But any deal I make, toward the end, I'm going to bring Schumer, at least offer him, and Pelosi. I'm going to say, please join me on the deal. And by the way, I just see our new Attorney General is sitting in the front row. Please stand up, Bill. Such an easy job he's got. He's got the easiest job in government. Thank you, and congratulations. That was a great vote yesterday. Thank you very much. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
In your remarks, sir, you said that you were too new to politics earlier in your administration when you would have preferred that this be done. Is that an admission of how you might be changing on the job? And
well, I'm learning. I mean, I am learning. Don't forget, it's not like I've done this for... A senator came into my office and said, I've been running for office for 30 years. I've won 7 out of 7. I did lose a couple when I was younger. I said, well, I've won 1 out of 1. But, you know, I never did politics before. Now I do politics. I will tell you, I'm very disappointed at certain people, particular one, for not having pushed this faster.
Are you referring to Speaker Ryan, sir?
Who?
Speaker Ryan?
Let's not talk about it.
Okay.
What difference does it make? But they should have pushed it faster. They should have pushed it harder. And they didn't. They didn't. If they would have, it would have been a little bit better. In the meantime, I've built a lot of wall. I have a lot of money, and I built a lot of wall. But it would have been nice to have gotten done. And I would like to see major immigration reform. And maybe that's something we can all work on. bill where we all get together and do major immigration reform, not just for a wall, for a barrier, for port of entry, for other things. We have a real problem. We have catch and release. You catch a criminal, and you have to release him. We have so many other things. You have chain migration, where a bad person comes in, brings 22 or 23 or 35 of his family members because he has his mother, his grandmother, his sister, his cousin, his uncle. They're all in. You know what happened on the West Side Highway. That young wise guy drove over and killed 8 people and horribly injured. Nobody talks about that. Horribly, like loss of legs and arms. Going 60 miles an hour, he made a right turn into a park on the West Side Highway along the Hudson River in New York. He had many people brought in because he was in the United States. It's called chain migration. And then you have the lottery. It's a horror show. Because when countries put people into the lottery, they're not putting you in. They're putting some very bad people in the lottery. It's common sense. If I ran a country, and if I have a lottery system of people going to the United States, I'm not going to put in my stars. I'm going to put in people I don't want. The lottery system's a disaster. I'm stuck with it.
Mr. President, could you tell us...
It should have never happened. Okay.
Mr. President, could you tell us to what degree some of the outside conservative voices helped to shape your views on this national emergency?
I would talk about it. Look, Sean Hannity has been a terrific, terrific supporter of what I do, not of me. If I changed my views, he wouldn't be with me. Rush Limbaugh, I think he's a great guy. He's a guy who can speak for 3 hours without a phone call. Try doing that sometime. For 3 hours he speaks. He's got one of the biggest audiences in the history of the world. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. Try speaking for 3 hours without taking calls. Taking calls is easy. Okay, I'll answer this one, I'll answer that one. He goes for 3 hours, and he's got an audience that's fantastic. Wait, they don't decide policy. In fact, if I went opposite, I mean, they have somebody, Ann Coulter. I don't know her. I hardly know her. I haven't spoken to her in way over a year. But the press loves saying Ann Coulter. Probably if I did speak to her, she'd be very nice. I just don't have the time to speak to her. I would speak to her. I have nothing against her. In fact, I like her for one reason. When they asked her, like right at the beginning, who's going to win the election? She said, Donald Trump. And the 2 people that asked her that question smiled. They said, you're kidding, aren't you? Nope, Donald Trump. So I like her. But she's off the reservation, but anybody that knows her understands that. But I haven't spoken to her. I don't follow her. I don't talk to her. But the press loves to bring up the name Ann Coulter. And you know what? I think she's fine. I think she's good, but I just don't speak to her. Laura's been great, Laura Ingraham. Tucker Carlson's been great. I actually have a couple of people on CNN that have been very good. I have some on MSNBC the other day. They did a great report of me. I say, where the hell did that come from? I think it was the only one in over a year. So the crazy thing is, I just had, as you know, Rasmussen 52% in the polls. This is my highest poll number. And people get what we're doing. They get it. They really get it. And I'm honored by it. Yes, Jim Acosta.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wonder if you could comment on this disconnect that we seem to have in this country, where you are presenting information about what's happening at the border, calling it an invasion, talking about women with duct tape over their mouths and so on, and yet there's a lot of reporting out there, there's a lot of crime data out there, there's a lot of Department of Homeland Security data out there that shows border crossings at a near record low. That shows undocumented immigrants committing crime at lower levels. That shows undocumented criminals or undocumented immigrants committing crime at lower levels than native-born Americans. What do you say to
you don't really believe that stat? Do you really believe that stat? Take a look at our federal prisons.
I believe in facts and statistics and data.
Any more? Quick, let's go.
But let me just ask you this. What do you say to your critics who say that you are creating a national emergency, that you're concocting a national emergency here in order to get your wall because you couldn't get it through other ways?
Moms, what do you think? Do you think I'm creating something? Ask these incredible women who lost their daughters and their sons. Okay? Because your question is a very political question because you have an agenda. You're CNN. You're fake news. You have an agenda. The numbers that you gave are wrong. Take a look at our federal prison population. See how many of them, percentage-wise, are illegal aliens. Just see. Go ahead and see. It's a fake question. Yes, go ahead.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to follow up on that, unifying crime reporting statistics, numbers from your own Border Patrol, numbers from this government show that the amount of illegal immigrants are down. There is not violence on the border, and that
there's
most
violence on the
there's
border?
not as much violence
really?
as.
Wait a minute. People
Let me finish the question, please. Let me finish the question.
2 weeks ago, 26 people were killed in a gunfight on the border.
I understand what you're saying.
A mile away from where I went.
I was there. I understand. That's not the question. The question is.
Do we forget about that?
No, I'm not forgetting about it. I'm asking you to clarify where you get your numbers because most of the DEA crimes reporting statistics that we see show that drugs are coming across at the ports of entry, that illegal immigration is down, and the violence is down. Okay. So what do you base your facts on?
Come on, let's go.
Secondly...
no, you get one. You get one.
Well, the second
Just
question is...
Wait, sit down. Sit down.
Could you please answer?
Sit down. You get one question. I get my numbers from a lot of sources, like Homeland Security, primarily. And the numbers that I have from Homeland Security are a disaster. And you know what else is a disaster? The numbers that come out of Homeland Security, Kirsten, for the cost that we spend and the money that we lose because of illegal immigration. Billions and billions of dollars a month. Billions and billions of dollars. And it's unnecessary.
So your own government stats are wrong, are you saying?
No, I use many stats.
Could you share those stats with us?
Let me tell you, you have stats that are far worse than the ones that I use. But I use many stats, but I also use Homeland Security. All right, next question.
And do you, wait a minute, just a quick follow-up, Mr.
Go, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to bring you back to China for a second. The White House put out a statement today talking about the March 1st deadline. The other day, though, you gave the possibility that maybe this could slide. Are you eyeing a possible extension, 30 days, maybe 60 days? Where does the status there? Or is March 1st
So it's a very
deadline?
big deal. I guess you could say it's like, must be the biggest deal ever made if you think. Trade with China, how big does that get? Although if you look, the USMCA is right up there. But it's very complicated. There are many, many points that we're bringing up that nobody ever brought up or thought to bring up, but they're very important because we were on the wrong side of every one of them. There is a possibility that I will extend the date. And if I do that, if I see that we're close to a deal or the deal is going in the right direction, I would do that at the same tariffs that we're charging now. I would not increase the tariffs.
Let me also ask you about the debt, sir, because it's gone from a shade under 20 trillion from when you took office. Now it's a shade over 22 trillion and heading in the wrong direction. What are your plans to reverse it?
Well, it's all about growth. But before I really focus on that, and you have to remember, President Obama put on more debt on this country than every president in the history of our country combined. So when I took over, we had one man that put on more debt than every other president combined. Combine them all. So you can't be talking about that. But I talk about it because I consider it very important. But first I have to straighten out the military. The military was depleted. And if we don't have a strong military, that hopefully we won't have to use because it's strong, if we don't have a strong military, you don't have to worry about debt. You have bigger problems. So I had to straighten out the military. That's why I did the 700 and 716 billion. But growth will straighten it out. You saw last month the trade deficit went way down. Everybody said, what happened? Well, what's happening is growth. But before I can focus too much on that, a very big expense is military. And we have no choice but to straighten out our military.
Is growth the only answer, sir, or is entitlement?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. On North Korea, back on the last summit, you guys came out with a pretty general agreement.
Yes.
I was wondering what you thought has, been accomplished since the last summit, and then are we going to be seeing anything concrete on denuclearization?
Yeah, a lot's been accomplished. We're dealing with them. We're talking to them. When I came into office, I met right there in the Oval Office with President Obama. And I sat in those beautiful chairs, and we talked. It was supposed to be 15 minutes. As you know, it ended up being many times longer than that. And I said, what's the biggest problem? He said, by far, North Korea. And I don't want to speak for him, but I believe he would have gone to war with North Korea. I think he was ready to go to war. In fact, he told me he was so close to starting a big war with North Korea. Now, where are we now? No missiles, no rockets, no nuclear testing. We've learned a lot. But much more importantly than all of it, much more important than that, is we have a great relationship. I have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un. And I've done a job. In fact, I think I can say this. Prime Minister Abe of Japan gave me the most beautiful copy of a letter that he sent to the people who give out a thing called the Nobel Prize. He said, I have nominated you, or respectfully on behalf of Japan, I am asking them to give you the Nobel Peace Prize. I said, thank you. Many other people feel that way too. I'll probably never get it, but that's okay. They gave it to Obama. He didn't even know what he got it for. He was there for about 15 seconds and he got the Nobel Prize. He said, oh, what did I get it for? With me, I probably will never get it. But if you look at Idlib province in Syria, I stopped the slaughter of perhaps 3 million people. Nobody talk about that. They don't talk about that. Russia and Iran and Syria were going to go in and perhaps destroy 3 million people in order to get 45,000 terrorists. And I heard about it from a woman who had her parents and her brothers living there, and she said, please, please. And I said, no, it can't happen. What are you talking about? No, they're going to get, and I come home and I read a certain paper where the story was there that they were actually forming to go into, to really do big destruction. And I put out a statement that you better not do it. And in all fairness to Russia and Iran and Syria, they didn't attack, or they're doing it surgically at least. Saved a lot of people. We do a lot of good work. This administration does a tremendous job, and we don't get credit for it. But I think the people understand what we do. So Prime Minister Abe gave me, I mean, it's the most beautiful five-page letter. Nobel Prize. He sent it to them. You know why? Because he had rocket ships and he had missiles flying over Japan. And they had alarms going off. You know that. Now all of a sudden they feel good. They feel safe. I did that. And it was a very tough dialogue at the beginning. Fire and fury, total annihilation. My button is bigger than yours and my button works. Remember that? You don't remember that. And people said, Trump is crazy. And you know what it ended up being? A very good relationship. I like him a lot and he likes me a lot. Nobody else would have done that. The Obama administration couldn't have done it. Number one, they probably wouldn't have done it. And number two, they didn't have the capability to do it. So I just want to thank everybody. I want to wish our new Attorney General great luck and speed and enjoy your life. Bill, good luck. A tremendous reputation. I know you'll do a great job. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, President Trump declaring a national emergency to get additional funding for his border wall. We heard a lot in the original speech, and then, of course, there's a question and answer session afterwards. He said, I'm going to be signing today and registering a national emergency, and it's been signed many times before. There's rarely been a problem. Nobody cares. They sign it for far less important things. Let's bring back in Michael McKee, our chief international economics and policy correspondent, and Kevin Cirilli, of course, who is live at the White House. Kevin, this was anticipated. He will actually have to sign this at some point, and at that, we're already getting some pushback. New York's Attorney General, for example, saying she's going to use all the tools in her power to combat this. What kind of a blowback do you anticipate?
Well, the president essentially saying bring it on in terms of the looming legal battle that is now going to be triggered as a result of his declaration of a national emergency to secure $8 billion worth of additional funds for the wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Some other market-moving developments, though, out of his comments, including that he is open to delaying that March 1st deadline of a tariff increase on a host of additional U.S. or Chinese imports coming into the U.S. He also signaled a path forward potentially in his strategy to negotiate with President Xi Jinping of China, offering to invite Democrats to those trade negotiations.
All right, Kevin Cirilli, thank you for your coverage. We will be chatting to you again in just a little bit. Let's bring in Michael McKee now, who is beside me. Michael, the market hasn't reacted really at all. We weren't expecting it to react. Nevertheless, this is a huge development. The president effectively taking control, declaring a national emergency, and really making nothing of it, saying, you know, there are 28. He didn't actually say this, but there happen to be 28 national emergencies already declared. He said we have an invasion of drugs, an invasion of people, and he's doing it.
There are actually 34.
34, okay.
But here's the most interesting thing out of the whole news conference. He was asked about his emergency declaration. He said, I don't have to do this. I just want to build the wall faster. Well, that undercuts his whole case. If he doesn't have to do a national emergency, then why is he doing a national emergency? And that's been noted by a lot of people all of a sudden. The legal experts are chomping at the bit to get at this one and put that before a federal judge. So it was a very bizarre, rambling, fact-challenged news conference on the president's part that touched, as Kevin said, on so many different things. But he went to the core of his argument and said it wasn't necessarily true. That's the big takeaway on the national emergency here.
Yes, and he mentioned his platform and said we ran on Make America Great Again. What he didn't mention was that they also ran on making Mexico pay for the wall, and you know that part is forgotten conveniently. He said we haven't been given the equipment, we haven't been given the walls when it comes to stopping drugs from coming into our country. Whatever about the factuality of that, however drugs do come into the country, and, you know, there are many, many ways, that's going to play well with his base, right?
It may. This was a very strange news conference. He was asked, speaking of his base, about the pressure he might have felt from right-wing commentators to shut the government down, and he launched out a very long, rambling comments on how great specific right-wing commentators like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity are. So, you know, citing the base, citing the people that he likes, maybe they will enjoy this. But to the point about whether or not the drugs are coming into the country and the facts, he was asked twice by two reporters, where does he get his numbers? Because he's talking about this epidemic of drugs coming in and women being tied up and tape over their mouths and being driven into the country and all these things that he's trying to stop. And the data don't show that. And he was asked twice, where do you get your facts? And he refused to say. He said, I get facts from the Department of Homeland Security. He was asked if he would share them, and he ignored the question. He didn't have any answer for where this all comes from.
And he didn't actually mention a figure that I heard either. I mean, obviously there's a spending bill that he intends to sign either today or tomorrow, and we know that there's $1.37 billion in there for the wall, as President Trump calls it, but he didn't say what the national emergency was going to pull in terms of money. Hold that thought, because we're going to get back to Washington, D.C. and bring in Andrew Harris, who's Bloomberg government legal reporter, live obviously in Washington, D.C. Andy, we already have the New York Attorney General coming out and saying that she is going to put every tool that she has at her disposal into protesting this national emergency. What tools are at whose disposal here?
Well, we have no shortage of people who are lining up and threatening to sue possibly the New York Attorney General, more likely the Attorney Generals from California and New Mexico and potentially even Nevada, the border states where this wall is going to be built, where land is going to be appropriated, and where people are going to be most directly affected by President Trump's declaration. So, as I said, no shortage of people lining up to file lawsuits to stop this.
That's for the Attorney Generals. In terms of Congress, what do we expect next? Now, the President hasn't signed anything, but he's told the nation that he is declaring a national emergency. So effectively, we're in a state of national emergency on this issue, it seems now. What do you anticipate Congress will do?
Well, That depends. First of all, obviously, as Mike McKee referenced, is this an emergency? Is it not an emergency? That's going to be a question on the merits that the court's going to have to tackle. At the same time, though, the president went to Congress twice to get the funding that he wanted, and 2 times they said no. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power of the purse string. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has already said this. There is precedent here in the federal court regarding a measure that President Obama's administration tried to put through without a congressional appropriation concerning Obamacare. That got knocked down by the court because there wasn't an appropriation. So there is some precedent for forcing the issue after Congress has said no, or where there's no actual appropriation for the expenditure that the president wants to make. He may be up against that a little bit.
And he did, in a sing-song voice, mention all of the courts that he could potentially see this going through. It didn't seem to stop his resolve. Both of you, if you would just hold on for just a few moments, I want to check the markets because, as the President Trump also said, the market is up tremendously today, and indeed, as regards the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it is. It's up 1.3%. The S&P 500 is up 0.8%. The Nasdaq is not having such a great day as the other indices, but it's still up 1/3%. Some earnings stories dragging on the Nasdaq. You can see the 10-year yield at 2.66% as well. Gold is sticking around 13.15, and the dollar index is just above 97, so not much impact from all of this on risk assets. We do want to, though, go to the European close now, and for that, let's get to London and our own Danny Berger.
European markets now closed for the day. You can really see just how big of a gain it was. We saw more than 1% for most of the region, even nearing 2% for IBEX and FTSE MIB. Global growth concerns really taking a back seat. Let's check out and see what the other majors did. FTSE 100, 72.36. There's actually an underperformance from UK stocks, likely all coming down to sterling effect. Pound gaining against the dollar by nearly 0.5%. Putting a lid on just how much UK stocks can gain for the day. Now, one of the real surprises was the turnaround in the DAX. Started the day to the downside after European car sales came in weaker than many had expected, but now up nearly 1.9%. A strong turnaround. A lot of those trade headlines also helping the DAX. And when it comes to trade headlines helping indexes, of course, we have to look out for the CAC to outperform. That's because of all those luxury goods in there. Also, Vivendi, another individual company story that helped the CAC outperform. Let's see where that ended, up 5.6%. Vivendi, they announced a dividend today, a buyback rather, maybe up to 1/4 of their shares. Dividend play, buyback play, both very large with European investors so far this year. So that might be why we saw such a positive reaction. Also looking to sell part of their Universal Music Group, a really profitable part of Vivendi. Scout24, the biggest gainer on the stock 600, ending up nearly 11%. They're going to accept a sweetened deal from Hellman and Blackstone. This deal puts it at 4.9 billion euros at 46 euros a share. And you can see smack on, that's right where Scout24 ended the day. Now, the final big mover of the day was Telecom Italia, Italy's state CDP lender. They are going to take a stake in Telecom Italia. This is according to people familiar. Now, this is going to be a big play, up 6.4%. Also, because one of the conditions of the stake is that they have to spin out their landline business. This is something investors have really wanted to see from Telecom Italia. And analysts say that it's worth 15 billion euros. Let's go ahead and also jump into my terminal. I also want to show you the volume picture for the day, because today a lot of conviction behind the trade. It looks like we're ending with more volume, something we rarely see going into weekends, but now it seems investors happy to hold on to their positions as markets gained into the close.
And that was our Danny Berger there with a look at the European close. Let's get some analysis now from Bloomberg's managing editor for rates and FX, Paul Dobson, who joins us. We're just about 10 minutes into the Friday close, Paul, and I guess one of the major things that moved markets in Europe today was this idea that the US and Europe are getting closer on trade.
That's definitely one of the things that people are talking about today. We're obviously a little bit anxious to see what might come through the weekend in terms of potential U.S. tariffs on European cars. At the same time, though, the broader, bigger picture, less trade tension, less friction, less chance of greater protectionism, good for European assets in particular. And then there was a helping factor as well today from the currency. The euro driving down again today. There's further comments from the ECB's Benoit Cœuré, who is one of the senior policymakers there, talking about the prospect of more stimulus in the terms of longer-term loans, talking dovishly, basically having investors push back their idea of when rates might start to rise in the euro area, which is, of course, another good reason to be excited about the stock markets.
Right. Now, in terms of currencies, we haven't seen a huge move. The euro is about 1/4% weaker versus the US dollar, trading at 112.67. And the British pound is trading stronger versus the US dollar, 128.52. I want to point out one thing that President Trump said about the UK. He said, trade with the UK will increase. Now, he can't really talk about that at the moment because the UK is still in Europe and it can't negotiate any trade deals, but he seems at least convinced that there's something to be said for talking about talking.
Yeah, and that's got to be a positive for the UK. I mean, any good news right now, basically a thing that would do the pound sterling investors, Brexit negotiators, everybody's crying out for any hint of good news, any prospect that things are getting a little bit nicer. Seemed earlier today there was a possibility as well from the European side, from the Irish, just a little hint, a whiff of could there be an olive branch coming along the way that could help Theresa May find some form of compromise that might be just enough to get her deal through the UK Parliament, which is where the real opposition to all this is at the moment. Comments on the border from Varadkar in Ireland saying we wouldn't want a hard border if there's a no-deal Brexit, which is kind of impossible, suggests that he wants to avoid a no-deal Brexit. Currency traders put 1 and 2 and 3 together, and they come to the idea that this is good news. The mood music is turning.
Paul Dobson, managing editor for Markets. Thank you, always insightful, and you can read his insights at MLIV Go. Meanwhile, leaders in politics and defence are in Bavaria, Germany today for the annual Munich Security Conference, and our Matt Miller is on the scene. Matt.
Hey there, Vonnie. Yeah, the big story here before Donald Trump signed this emergency ruling to build his border wall really was the showdown between the U.S. and China in terms of security. So Huawei is a huge issue, for example, here in Germany because the 4G network is built with it. If they build a 5G network, they're going to want to use them as well. I'm sure Paul Dobson could have commented on this because the UK is in a very similar situation that's been brought up today. On the other hand, the Germans haven't pleased the Americans by continuing to support the building out of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, another security issue that the Germans aren't able to avoid. And then, of course, there's the Iran issue. The foreign minister is here. Angela Merkel is coming here. We're awaiting a number of U.S. politicians here, including Nancy Pelosi and Vice President Mike Pence tonight. So this conference is really starting to kick off, but I have to say that the reverberations of Donald Trump's press conference are now really starting to roll around the campus here in front of the Bayerischer Hof Hotel. Vonnie?
Absolutely. That just happening a few minutes ago. And Matt, I know you'll be listening to everything and bringing us all of the news from that conference. Our appreciation to Bloomberg's Matt Miller in Munich. Let's turn now to a company story, the company story potentially for New York City at least. Shares of Amazon, they're still in the red today. The company pulling out obviously of that plan to build headquarters in New York City. Let's get to Bloomberg's Spencer Soper in Seattle. It is day 2, the sort of original euphoria or despair has worn off from those on either side of this story. Spencer, I spoke to an analyst earlier on who said this is gamesmanship. Amazon certainly is thinking about maybe coming back to the table if New York reaches out. Is that a little bit too conspiratorial?
It could be, but who knows? This thing has just gone in so many different directions very suddenly. It's anyone's guess. we have heard indications that it's not a negotiation ploy. And the bottom line is Amazon could simply keep growing there. They've already got a presence there. They could just try to keep growing under a low profile without all the pomp and circumstance around tax breaks. So, you know, it's clear that Amazon certainly has made a big decision to pull out of this big office expansion and the deal that has been negotiated. What we don't know is exactly how they're going to regroup and where the bodies are going to fall now.
And certainly they're not doing TV interviews right now anyway. We did put out the request. Our thanks for the moment to Bloomberg's Spencer Soper reporting from Seattle. He'll bring us the latest. Amazon currently down 1%. From New York, this is Bloomberg.